When the pasuk relates how Shimon and Levi, each one take their sword and they go kill the people of Shechem, the pasuk describes it as Vayikhu Shnei Bnei Yaakov, Shimon v'Levi, etc. Achei dina, ish charboy, each man took his sword, describing them as a ish. Razal tell us, our sages tell us, that Shimon and Levi were both 13 years old at the time, and this teaches us from the fact that the Torah is calling 13-year-olds as an ish. This is where we learn out that a 13-year-old is chayiv in mitzvahs. That is, if they're considered an ish, which an ish means a man, an adult, someone that is already fully developed in his understanding, maturity, and so on. So then this is why he will be obligated in doing mitzvahs. Now, even though it's of course true that sometimes you can have a child that's younger than 13, and very, very intellectual, etc. But nevertheless, what he's lacking is the full das, the full maturity in his ability to appreciate things, his feeling towards things, being able to appreciate the mitzvahs, being able to realize how terrible it is to do an aveira, etc. And therefore, we don't hold him accountable and responsible before the age of 13. Now, the Rebbe says, the Rabbeim would often start the Maimorim of Bar Mitzvah with the words Naaseh Adam. Now, Adam is a different word to Ish. We know that humans are called by 4 names: Adam, Ish, Enosh, and Gever. Now, Adam is the highest title that people are referred to. And here we were speaking in our pasuk about Ish. Ish was already showing that someone is mature in his intellectual capacities and appreciation for things, etc. But when the Rabbeim would start with the word Nasa Adam, and Adam is a higher title than Ish, there must be something in Adam that's even more than in Ish. Now, seemingly, if in order to be obligated in mitzvahs the level of Ish is enough, why do we need the level of Adam? And the question becomes even stronger, because Chassidus explains that Ish represents that level of intellect that's somewhat connected to feelings, emotions, etc. Whereas the level of Adam represents a level of intellect that's completely beyond the emotional range. And therefore the question becomes even stronger. How is it possible to connect this idea of an Adam with a young boy that just turned 13? So yes, he became an Ish already, but to say that what's expected of him is even more than this, the level of Adam, how do we understand what's the connection of Adam to the concept of Bar Mitzvah? The Rebbe says the truth of the matter is, within our psukim itself, where we learn it out from Shimon and Levi, we realize that there must be something more than just the level of ish, or just the level of intellectual maturity that's needed for the bar mitzvah boy. And this could be seen from the fact that what's the pasuk speaking about? The pasuk on the one hand was hinting to us that we're speaking about a mature, intellectual boy, and at the same time, and that's why he's accepting upon himself the responsibility, accountability for Torah and mitzvahs, but at the same time, we're learning it out from a pasuk where these boys, Shimon and Levi, or young adults, are actually now, men really, are actually now going and taking swords and killing the people of Shechem, which really represents seemingly a very heightened level of emotion rather than intellect, which tells us that there's something more that's needed for the bar mitzvah bacher, more than just that level of ish, to mature level of intellect. This will help us understand also the concept of Nasa Adam, that although, yes, it's true that what's needed for a bar mitzvah boy seemingly mainly is the idea of ish, but at the same time, he also needs something more than that, and that's going to be represented in the concept of Adam, which is going to be a similar idea to the idea of Shimon and Levi taking their swords. To explain, in regards to the source of where we learn out this concept that a 13-year-old is chayiv in mitzvahs, there are 2 opinions. One opinion is the one that we just mentioned. It's from these psukim, where describing Shimon and Levi as an ish. There's another opinion that says it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. This is just the way it was passed down to us from Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, the practical difference between these two would be, according to the first opinion, what we're saying is it's a natural thing. It's a natural thing. The Torah is just telling us these Shimon and Levi were now at that stage of ish, which means this is the natural thing that happens. A 13-year-old boy is mature enough to be able to appreciate things and so on, and this is what happens to the majority of people. According to the second opinion, we're not looking at what the nature of children over here are. We're saying it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's similar to other shiurim, that this is just given over to us as a halacha, and it has nothing to do with the nature of the child. And the very practical difference would be is when our B'nai Noach, when our Goyim obligated in their mitzvahs. If it's something that at 13-year-old was saying this is the nature of a child to become more mature and an adult, and that applies to Goyim as well. If it's halacha l'Moshe Missinai, the shiurim, the measurements that are halacha l'Moshe Missinai don't apply to Goyim. We would need to look at each Goy individually and see when he is mature enough to be obligated, responsible for mitzvahs. The Rebbe says in Avodas Adam, really what these two opinions represent are two attitudes, are two outlooks. If we say that it's just a natural thing, this is the time the child could naturally appreciate, with his understanding, with his mature intellect, the idea of Torah and mitzvahs. We're saying the approach to Torah and mitzvahs is really about rationale, about understanding, about intellect. On the other hand, what we're saying is, if we say that it's halacha l'Moshe Missinai, it's just this is the command of Hashem. Hashem says that at 13 years, a child is obligated to mitzvahs. The whole approach of Torah and mitzvahs is then more in a way of Kabbalah soil. However, says the Rebbe, even the opinion that says that we do go based on our pasuk, that a 13-year-old is an ish, and it's to do with the nature of most boys are just mature enough at that age. In other words, we follow this idea that Torah and mitzvahs is being done with seichel, with understanding, etc. But from the actual fact that we're learning it out from which pasuk? The pasuk that speaks about how they go on Mesiras Nefesh to go kill the people of Shechem to save their sister, etc. That teaches us that really the foundation is always going beyond seichel, and with Mesiras Nefesh beyond seichel. The only thing is that yes, we need the seichel as well, we need the intellect as well, but it needs to be based on something that's beyond logic, on Mesiras Nefesh, and only in that way will the logic and the seichel also end up being in the right way and directed in the right way. And the Rebbe brings another example for this, or a proof for this. We know that Hashem tells us, Re'ei nosati lefonecha, I have given you today es hachayim ves hatoiv, that which is life, that which is good. And chas v'shalom, the opposite. The Torah commands us, Hashem commands us, uvacharta b'chayim, you should choose life. Now, seemingly, if it's life and good, we shouldn't have to be told to choose it. We understand that it's life and good. But it's really this same idea. If we're going to go based just on what we understand, then that's not called an oived Hashem, one who's a true servant of Hashem, which is Kabbalah soil, doing it because Hashem said so. You're doing it based on your logic. And therefore the Torah says, uvacharta b'chayim, you should do it because Hashem told you to choose life. But at the same time, Hashem also wants that it should really permeate. We should appreciate with every fiber of our being that Torah is good. And we should be understanding it with our seichel as well. And the Torah is explaining to us that we should see that this is life and this is good. But again, the foundation needs to be because Hashem said so. It says that even now we can apply this all to the Maimorim that start off with the words Nasa Adam. The word Adam, on the one hand, we said, yes, it does represent a very high level of intellect, but there's another meaning of the word Adam. The word Adam is the same letters as the word Ma'oid, which means very much. Chassidus explains this represents the avoid of going beyond limitations, beyond logic, beyond reason. The avoid of Mesiras Nefesh. And these two Pirushim and Ma'oid are really connected, based on what we said before. You always need to have these two things going together. On the one hand, yes, you have the Seichel, you have that full understanding, but it needs to be permeated and based on ideas of Mesiras Nefesh that are completely higher than Seichel. And when you do have the Mesiras Nefesh, it has to come down and fill the whole person and permeate every one of his faculties, starting with his intellect and his Seichel. Says the Rebbe, this is the message really that we're telling the Bar Mitzvah Bacher. Yes, you're growing up now, you're becoming a man, you're becoming mature, you have full Seichel, but you need to have the avodah needs to be based on an avodah of Mesiras Nefesh. Similar to Shimon and Levi, and similar to the message that in addition to Ish, you have to have the idea of Adam, which again, Adam is the same letters as Ma'oid, which means going beyond, completely beyond your own intellect, and serving Hashem with absolute Kabbalah soil and Mesiras Nefesh.